Special guest stand-up comic Tuck Tucker deflects an uncomfortable memory in this episode of Balderdash Academy.
Hello and welcome to Balderdash Academy. I'm your headmaster, Bob LeBlanc. Joining me, as always, is our faculty, the head of Home Ec and Wellness, Professor Marie Stewart-Harmon.
Hello, everybody.
Head of Guidance, Mr. Nate Green.
Thank you. Calm down.
Coach of the Balderdash Academy Dashers, Coach Steve Corning.
Let's go Dashers!
Head of English Language Arts, Professor Molly McGill.
Greetings, everyone.
Our visiting professor today is Tuck Tucker, stand-up comic and improviser with Running with Scissors and the Chamber of Comedy. Tuck, welcome to Balderdash Academy.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tuck is a stand-up comic. You are an improviser. You are a general all-around entertainer. What got you into comedy?
Ooh, well, so comedy, I feel like it starts with family. I thought my father was hilarious. And so I loved his sense of humor. And then there was a show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? The British version. And I absolutely fell in love with improv. And I took an improv workshop in Portland, and then slowly got into a group, instant comedy, which I was in for several years, and then worked in and out of the Comedy Connection for a while with their improv group, and started my own Running with Scissors, which is still going and has been going for about 15 years. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started. Also took a stand-up workshop class. So for me, it always started with a class, working my way in slowly into shows and meeting people in the comedy community, as all of you have become close friends in the comedy community, and it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun.
So how long ago did you start?
Improv, well, probably 22, 23 years ago. Stand-up is probably close to 16 years now.
So improv came first.
Improv did come first, yeah. Improv, I never even thought about doing stand-up. The skill sets really are quite different. What I find is improv really helps with stand-up. I also feel like improv helps just in general in life, because you're always yes-anding, you're agreeing, and I believe that can open up doors in life. If you're agreeing and you're moving forward, it generates. I don't find that stand-up necessarily helps my improv. It's just, I don't know why, it just doesn't. And stand-up is more of it's more of like a skill where you have to hone it, you have to craft it, you have to work on your material, you have to get up in front of people, you have to try and try again. Improv, your whole goal is to make the other improver look good. And there's something beautiful about that. Because if you have 3 or 4 people on stage and your whole goal is to make them look good and develop that scene, there's nothing better. I would rather bomb at stand-up than bomb at improv.
Interesting.
I think bad improv is one of the worst things you can see in life. Watching a bad stand-up bomb can actually be kind of fun.
Right.
As a stand-up, it's kind of fun to see people bomb on stage. As an improver, when I'm seeing bad improv, I'm like, this is why people make fun of improv. You know? So
True.
I've heard that every stand-up has a set where they just bomb. Is there one that stands out for you?
yes. There's several.
You want to relive it?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, but
Thanks,
here's
Nate.
the thing. Here's the thing about stand-up is that when you start, all you're going to do is bomb. I bombed with the material I think is my A material right now. I even bombed with. because when you're doing stand-up, it's not so much the material, it's your delivery. So what you're doing is you're learning your delivery, learning how to tell that joke, deliver it in a funny way. And it doesn't matter if it's the best material or the worst material in the world. If you don't know how to deliver it, you're going to bomb. So your first couple years of stand-up, all you're doing is bombing and bombing and bombing. And slowly it gets better. Slowly you get to laugh. Slowly you learn to string your bits together. And then before you know it, you have a 5-minute set, you have a 10-minute set, you have a 20-minute set, and you're off and running.
There's so you have this rhythm when you're performing stand-up, but it often gets disrupted by hecklers, right?
Yeah.
Something I find very impressive is the way that stand-up comedians can work that in, address it, and then toss it out. Do you have any advice or stories of when somebody has heckled you?
Yeah, so
No, not that one.
heckling is part of the stand-up business. So, but again, like I said, it's a skill to learn how to deal with hecklers. One mistake that a rookie stand-up will do is they'll say, does anybody here have a dog? Or, hey, has anybody ever done this? What you're doing is you're asking the audience a question. And when you ask somebody a question, you better be ready for a response. And that's the trap that a lot of young stand-ups get in, is that they start their bit or their joke with a question. And then people start chiming in, and then they don't know how to handle it. Because dealing with a heckler or someone that's talking to you on stage is another skill set. So it took me probably 2 years before I felt comfortable working the crowd, as we call it in stand-up. And now I actually love it, and I will reach out to the audience and say, where are you from? What's your name? Are you two a couple? Are you two together? And you can actually, your set becomes fuller, more robust because of that. You're dealing with all that. And it's kind of like people like to see the crowd work a lot of times.
So how much of the background of that crowd work came from your experience in improv?
A lot. So that's one part of stand-up where improv really helped me, because I was able to transition talking with the crowd and being sharp-witted and thinking on my feet very easily, where a lot of stand-ups that don't have that improv background, they didn't really know how to deal with people, talk with them, maybe even yes-anding when you're doing stand-up. And what a lot of comics will do is they'll attack. I'm going to rip this. If someone's talking to me or a heckler, you want to attack them, try to shut them up because it's making you uncomfortable. What I find the best thing to do is engage them. And if someone's heckling you or talking to you, engage them, find out something about them, and then use that to move on to a next bit or make something funny about it. But it's really depends on what you're like in real life is your character on stage too. I don't attack people in real life. I try not to be mean to people in real life. So I'm not going to be on stage as a stand-up and attack people and try to rip people apart. It's just not part of my nature.
So how much of your stand-up persona is you or a character?
What's that? I'm saying that again?
How much of your stand-up is a character versus being yourself?
It's probably,
or is it all you?
It's probably 50-50. There's definitely a character that you develop as a stand-up. And so my character on stage is high energy, a little goofy, self-deprecating, and I try to be real physical on stage just because I love that. I like to try to fill the room with energy, and that's kind of my character. So off stage, when people meet me, like after a show, I'm the worst. I don't want to talk with people. Not that I don't like them. It's just like, I don't know if they like the show. I feel awkward trying to talk to the crowd after a show. Other comics love it. They'll sit and gab with people for an hour after a show. Me, I almost want to go back to the green room and hide. But on stage, I'm totally different. I'll talk to everybody in the room. I'll ask you a million questions. That's where the difference is between who I am on stage and off. I'm just a little more shy and reserved off the stage. On stage, let it go. It doesn't matter. Be crazy.
I feel
Which
like
maybe is why I like it, because that's part of the fun of it.
Right. I feel like self-deprecation is inherent in all stand-up.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
People hate themselves.
Well, self-deprecation is better than self-defecation. So
Yeah, which I have not done on stage yet.
I tried it once. Not very funny.
Yeah, don't knock it till you try it. So,
Okay.
Some people, Steve, it didn't work for you. It was a miracle worker for me. It was some of the best work I've ever done.
I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Nate.
Glad to have missed it. So I've been listening to.
I'd like to give Steve Corning 2 points for this.
Yes. Let's go. I'm on the board.
2 for Steve.
Yeah, you're in the lead, buddy.
I can give points at any time, right?
Yeah, you can.
Anytime, for any reason.
Well, I've been listening to a lot of women in stand-up when I go running, and so everybody has their favorites. So who is?
Let me ask you a question.
What?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you find that the female comics that you're listening to are excessively dirty?
Some of them, definitely. Yeah. I feel like that's kind of like a niche for the female comics.
Yeah, I feel like for female comics, it's always been hard for them to kind of break into, because it's almost like a good old boys club.
Yeah.
And I think it's been that way for years. I think it's changing, because there are amazing female comics now. And I think it has changed a lot. But I think even when I started 15 years ago, it was really hard. Even the clubs I played, there weren't a lot of female headliners. And now there's a ton of them. But I think 15 years ago, for them to kind of be recognized, they had to be really dirty. But I don't think that's the case as much anymore. I think it's changing.
Now, how much of that do you think is the old boys club, or how much of that do you think is there's a persistent myth that I hear in comedy that women aren't funny? And we know that's a myth. We know that's complete BS.
Yeah.
But how much of that do you think it's that type of perception?
I don't think so anymore. Maybe an older generation thought that. I don't think the generation that's doing comedy now, or the younger generation coming up, I don't think that they see it that way anymore. If you're funny, you're funny. And if you're a dirty comic, you're a clean comic, you're a prop comic, it doesn't matter. You're female, you're male, transgender, fluid, whatever. If you're funny, funny is funny.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, when you said when you're funny, you're funny. What about regional comedy? Like regional comedy? Like, I've seen Bob Marley is a main comic, but I've seen him on Comedy Central change his jokes a bit, so that way it reached the broader audience. Do you find that and you do a lot of traveling for your job, do you find that you have to change jokes depending upon where you are?
No, I don't, because I don't and I actually consciously try to avoid writing a lot of jokes about Maine or New England. And part of it is for that. But part of it is it's like, okay, if I write this joke about Moxie, where can I do it? So if I need to headline in New Hampshire, I need to headline in New York or further out, I can't do that joke. So I really try to write jokes about, job, relationships, friends, just things like that, sports, whatever else.
Everybody can relate to.
Yeah, I try to stay away from the regional stuff if I can. But sometimes the joke's just there to be plucked, and you got to take it. So I do have a handful of Maine stuff. I have a handful of, but it's a really low percentage of my joke.
Do you have any pre-show superstitions, whether in improv or stand-up, like something ritual or superstition that you have to do, like favorite pair of boxers, like?
Or briefs?
No, I don't. The only thing that I make sure I do, I write out my set list the night before, a couple days before, depending on how much time I do, and I run it over and over in my head for 2 days before the show to make sure that I know the lineup. And then the other thing I don't do, I don't have a drink. I don't do any drugs or anything before a show. I know a lot of comics that have to have a drink, they have to smoke some weed, they have to do something, and that is their kind of tradition or whatever to get into the show. I tried to drink once before a show. It was a disaster. And I mean, it was like one beer, and I was like, I can't do it. I'm off. I felt fuzzy, and
Yeah.
so, but I know a comic that he puts an MH on his hand before every show, and that's for Mitch Hedberg, who was his idol. So, you know, there's little things, a lot of comics have those superstitions and little things that they do. A lot of comics will wear the same type of shirt, like it might be a Hawaiian shirt, or they wear a hat, certain hat, and that's kind of their thing. So there's, you know, those are out there.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. You can find us on your favorite podcast service as Balderdash Academy. Go Dashers!